Hello again, and what do we have here today? Today we've got the Shrink Ray, featuring Giotto, Sargon, and their conversion to Anarchy. This deck is a Barrenness deck. We are not going for the superior version of Barrenness, but we are going for the inferior version. We are trying to shrink our opponent's vampires into near oblivion. Oblivion for them is reached by Gehenna cards, playing Nightmares Upon Nightmares, which will force them to have to burn cards in order to lock if they're smaller than the number of Gehenna cards in play. Thirst, which will punish them for not hunting if they have less than the number of Gehenna cards in play. And that will force them to hunt, I'm now forgetting the wording on this card. But yeah, they can hunt only from, they may hunt by hunting from younger vampires. So this locks them in the weird situation with Thirst, so that ideally most of the vampires in the game are basically going to be stuck hunting off of each other. It's like a kind of neat little tie-in there, because if they do have some other way to get blood, then they'll lose it again from Thirst. So they have to kind of keep out of this struggle. We're also playing a Blood Trade and a Break the Code. A lot of the goal in the deck is to not have these Gehenna cards be as big a negative on you. Sargon can be affected by it because he's a 5-cap. So at peak, we might be affected by, and somebody else plays a Gehenna card, we might be affected by the cards, but overall that's not the goal. And less likely to happen. We're also playing a copy of Dr. Marissa Fletcher because if we get this little forced hunting strategy online, Fletcher gives us an interesting option of being able to burn vampires by blocking. In addition here, we are playing a number of interesting cards from Masters. We are running an Anarch Revolt, or an Anarch Railroad rather. Anarch Railroad, obviously, good free stealth. One Bleeding the Vine, very nice card for being able to cancel Masters if you're playing, especially if you're playing House of Sorrow. I don't know that it's really going to stick in this deck though. Being Infernal is a pretty big tax, and if you can keep a Path of Revelations, that's good. But if you can't, you're probably going to be starving. And even with the House of Sorrow Bleeding the Vine combo, it's probably not going to be good enough. Especially if periodically you're going to be using it for the Coven. It's a mechanic I really like. I really like the House of Sorrow Coven strategy. It's literally no loss. You just lose a House of Sorrow for an extra turn, which it's its job. Playing some Forshrit to make sure we can get Gehenna cards if we need them, if this comes up. Obviously, we're only playing one of. We could play more because Gehenna cards are important. The problem is that once per game really gets you stuck in having to churn through these cards. Playing a copy of Libertas because it stops bleed bounce as well as combat ends from presence cards. Well, it stops some bleed bounce and combat cards from presence cards. It also keeps allies out of the way. This effectively nullifies Carlton Van Wyck. Playing 9 copies of Maleficia because if we don't get this, we are not really doing anything in the deck. It's probably the hardest part of this deck is how many of these you have to play. Playing a copy of Not to Be because the Uncoiling's a pretty big problem for the deck. And then 6 copies of Tend the Flock because it's really good. If you can get a Giotto out, and you can get Sargon out fairly quickly after that. Playing 1 copy of Aranthebus, though I don't think he's going to stick around. I'm probably going to drop the House of Sorrow strategy, but we'll see. I got some thinking to do on that. And 1 copy of Rasta Courier. The goal of this card is if we deal with titled vampires, we have a way to at least take it down a little bit, have an extra alternative Barrenness. Barrenness does let you unlock after you're successful at the action of diminishing their capacity. So you can play a Barrenness and a Rasta Courier on a vampire and shrink their capacity, which is pretty handy against some of the Inner Circle members. Well, it doesn't nuke their title, it does shrink their stealth, so they can't on political actions, and the extra capacity discount can be kind of like punching them for 3 across table, or not across table, but without actually attacking them. To try to get the actions off, we're running 4 copies of Forgotten Labyrinth, 4 copies of Smoke and Mirrors, 5 copies of I Am Legion, and 1 copy of Salmaland, which is a questionable card. I think this card, again, it's another one of those cards that at inferior, it's still pretty good, but it's not as good if you can't get it at superior. So I don't know if this is going to stick. That's why I'm only playing one copy of it. Burning a pool to get a bleed is almost irrelevant, except in the most weird of emergency situations. Sense the Sin is another card that's kind of weird. Thing about it, using it as an ousting outlet, but in all honesty, a lot of the time it's not going to be as beneficial. The intercept seems like it'll be good, but one intercept's not a lot. We're not using any corruption counters, so the rest of it is irrelevant. Also playing 7 copies of Party Out of Bounds. Nice way, versatile way to get either votes when we need them or bleed reduction when we need it. And easy to cycle in most cases. Playing 2 copies of Bolex. Again, a little bit of versatility here, canceling an aim, frenzy, or grapple, or maneuvering or pressing if we need it. Diversion. We can play either the gain a strike with Sargon or prevent the damage with Giotto. Or we can play, and we play 3 copies of Flames of the Netherworld. This is basically a nice surprise ag strategy that is fairly versatile through Giotto, or is still good even when Sargon does it. Playing 1 copy of Evil Eye, a very, very good card at superior. A very interesting card at inferior. At superior, this card basically just cancels somebody doing something. They play an action card, you cancel it. No further actions occur. Very, very strong. Even losing a card until you unlock, this can be quite pivotal. Additionally, it can cancel a strike card at inferior. The problem is it is a strike card, which often means that a lot of situations are going to lead you to not have anything to do with it. It can cancel combat ends, but in this deck, that's a little less relevant. It does, when we cancel it, allow them to have no strike, so there are going to be some situations where that's beneficial, but for the most part, what you want to do is be able to get a strike that's going to really hit you hard, and if they're not playing a strike card with it, you're probably not going to get any success. So not sure about the Lesser of Evil Eye, and I'm not sure that with the superior it's going to want to keep it in the deck either. But yeah, I think overall there's a nice package within this deck. Again, probably going to drop the House of Sorrow, probably going to drop the Bleeding the Vine, most likely not going to keep the Sense the Sins in, because as a bleed package, I'm not really sure it's good enough, but maybe mileage may vary otherwise. But it would be nice to pump up this combat package a little bit, and maybe pad a little bit in our events package. But this is the deck. I did get an opportunity to play it, so later on if you want, you can give it a watch in a nice 5-player game. Otherwise, thank you all for watching. Take care.